So Zach, I ask everybody if they're comfortable, if they will do their dog voice. You can do both. Beta and Cora, if they're different voices, but if they're the same voice, give it to us.
Yeah, so it pretty much goes, who's my big baby girl? Who's my big baby girl? Who's my big beautiful baby girl? And then varieties of that. And then, yeah.
Welcome to Unconditional. I am so excited. I'm so moved by today's guest. I cannot wait for you to hear this interview. I am joined by Zach Skow, who is the co-founder of Marley's Mutts, which is an incredible rescue I've known for a very long time. And also through that, the Pawsitive Change Program, which is a program where they pair death row dogs with incarcerated students. And basically the death row dogs being the dogs that are, labeled unadoptable. And they work with them, they train them. I'll let him explain all of this. It's an incredible program. He is an incredible human, and I cannot wait for you to hear his story. We'll hear your story, these baby stories today, and I want to hear because I'm fascinated by the program. So the whole point of this podcast is this is not like a pet podcast where we're talking about like tricks and yes, there's going to be some probably like maybe health stuff or whatever, but for the most part, this is about the relationship.
Yeah,
it's a relationship podcast because I feel like it's one of the most profound relationships we have in our lives and one of the most healing.
I agree.
And so the focus is that piece. And that's like everything you're doing. Yeah. But like you're doing it I'm talking about like, this is love. I mean, look, I have a tiny 501.
I think it's wonderful. I think the fact that you've put this all together and are focusing on this element in particular, the human-animal bond and what it does to recontextualize how we see ourselves and how we move through trauma and pain and all the rest of it. Like dogs are a legit variable to mental health and a legit tool that can be used in so many ways. We tend to kind of novelty-ify it, right? Where we kind of, don't give it as much credit as we should for what it can do for us.
And I think we're like on the brink of, and you have been here for well before anyone else, of really getting into, you just touched on it a little bit, like the physiological, like that element too of like what actually happens to us, our bodies, being around them, petting them, feeling the love from them. But then like you're talking about a whole other thing of like people who, I watched one of the things you were talking about comparing like the prison system and the shelter system to being very similar. Yeah. And like the hope, I was watching some of these interviews with some of these men and like the hope that they have coming out of this program and also are being a part of this program. And then the shift that happens for these animals that are like unadoptable or difficult or death row dogs, basically. It's incredible. So first off, like you're amazing.
Thanks.
And I'm so happy you're here. I'm like, thanks. Because this is the point. Like this is the whole point of the podcast.
It quite literally permeates everything that I do. Yeah. My whole life changed the second I rooted into my dogs. I've always rooted into my dogs, but when I was left without any of my physical capacity, when I was really ill and injured and you don't really have any other choices and you can't trust your mind. This is like very early recovery in the throes of liver disease is when I really kind of turned my will and my life over to the care of a God of my understanding and dogs who understand me.
Go back. And the liver, the part. So you were not, what?
So I went into liver failure, acute alcoholic hepatitis. So I drank myself into liver failure when I was 28. My grandfather died from the same disease at 41. My dad was 14 when he passed away. So it's this type of alcoholism definitely runs in my family and is a big part of my family culture for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, essentially, the long story short, when I was 27, I started to turn yellow. I started to swell in my belly. I started to lose cognitive awareness. where I would kind of vacillate between present and
not being
checked
here.
out. Yeah, because ammonia was building up on my brain. And yeah, I mean, again, this is a very long and complex story. Like, you don't go into liver failure overnight. There was many, many years that I put into kind of developing this affliction. And I spent 6.5 weeks at Bakersfield Memorial Hospital in acute liver failure, just trying to get into a transplant hospital. There's only 7 hospitals that do transplant. And the first thing the doctors told my dad was, your son needs a liver transplant and he's not going to get one. And the reason is you need 6 months of sobriety just to qualify. I didn't have 6 hours of sobriety, much less 6 months. Wow. So we were really just in a holding pattern trying to keep me alive at Memorial and going through blood transfusion, frozen plasma transfusions every day, trying to, address the ammonia buildup on my brain. All these terrible things happen. Your kidneys fail, your pancreas, your gallbladder, like everything was going, But by the grace of, really it wasn't the grace of anything. It was my dad's hard work. My dad's an engineer. So he viewed this problem as my son is dying of liver failure. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to allow that to happen. Let me understand all the variables that go into this and I'm going to fix this problem, or I'm going to at least do my best to save my son's life. And that's really what he did. We had this chance encounter with a nurse at UCLA that was part of my insurance because the insurance was trying to kick us out of the hospital because we'd been there for so long. And they were encouraging hospice care and trying to send me home.
Holy shit.
So I got a meeting with the comprehensive transplant program at Cedars. And so my dad pulled, basically said, we're getting you out of here. You have a meeting. The doctors all intervened, said, you can't take him out of here. He's too fragile. He'll die. My dad said, I don't care what you're saying. We have a meeting to really go save his life and we're not going to miss it. So sign us out against doctor's orders, fill out all the legal paperwork, and we're out of here. And that's what we did. And we schlepped down here. I was born at Cedars-Sinai. I was 2.5 months premature when I was born here. And I lived there for 3 months when I was an infant. Same with my brother, my twin brother. And long story short, the all-female transplant team led by Dr. Tram Tran accepted me into the transplant program and then sent me home. She said, at that time I'd become addicted to drugs in the hospital, Dilaudid and morphine and then Dilaudid. Yeah. And when you get addicted to Dilaudid, that's all you think about. I mean, it's synthetic heroin that's more powerful than heroin. And she took me off that. She took me off almost all my medications. And she said, if we check you into this hospital, you'll die here.
Oh my God.
So we're going to send you home. We're going to, again, alleviate as much pressure on your liver and kidneys as we can. And you just need to try to survive. And you need to not eat any salt. They gave me very few parameters to follow. But essentially the instructions were, try not to eat salt, red meat, obviously no alcohol or drugs. And, getting home was much more difficult than I thought. I mean, first of all, I was in an extraordinary amount of pain. I was like 9 months pregnant, swollen. So in the hospital, I'm getting drained every 3 days. It's called paracentesis. They poke a big hole in your back or in your abdomen and they drain your stomach because your abdominal cavity just fills with blood and bile because your liver is not processing
like a sepsis type or
no, it's not sepsis. What happens is your hepatic duct that's pumping all of this stuff to be filtered through your liver isn't working. It's not accepting stuff. So it just backs up through portal hypertension into your abdominal cavity. So you get my belly button herniated. I used to tape it to my stomach so you couldn't see this thing like sticking out of my shirt, looking like a little boner, for lack of a better word. And seriously, I would wear long sleeve shirts. I would tape my stomach down. I'd wear sunglasses so you couldn't see how yellow my eyes were. I mean, before I went to the hospital, I hid it for as long as possible. I mean, I looked like the sickest sick person you've ever seen. And I did everything I could to cover it up, to not go to the hospital, to avoid having to terminate that relationship with alcohol and drugs. Telling me that I was not going to not have alcohol in my life, I might as well put a bullet in my head. I mean, every part of my life revolved around alcohol, how I coped, how I dealt with trauma, how I dealt with my emotions, how I dealt with evading feeling. Everything had to do with alcohol. And when I got home from the hospital, I didn't have any of those things. And I had to go cold turkey off Dilaudid. So the first thing I had to do was kick.
I've watched someone go through the hard drug like that. I don't know Dilaudid, but similar.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Yourself?
It was
like in your house?
Yeah. Yeah. I got home and again, we got admitted to the comprehensive transplant program at Cedars. And they said, if you can make it 6 months, you'll get your liver transplant. My twin brother also could have been eligible for a partial lobe transplant. There was all these things that we were looking at. So my only goal was to try to survive. But when I got home, I had to kick. And that happened first of all, I got my dad to drive me to the emergency room several times to get dope, so he got me. I would complain and complain, Dad, I'm in all this pain. I can't take it. We'd go to the emergency room. I'd get a shot of dope. We'd go home. And I did that. I convinced him to do that. I coerced him into doing that for me several times. And then I had to kick outright. And yeah, it was awful. I mean, the one thing I remember vividly about kicking dope at home was that Marley, my big Rottweiler pit bull, was next to me in bed. And I was seeing things. I was seeing blood coming down the walls. I was seeing, demons in the ceiling. I was hearing voices like telling me to kill myself. I was hearing my own voice telling me to do things. And I was weeping like constantly. And I was in so much pain because I was convulsing, and my stomach, was 9 months. I was huge. And Marley's just breath, I would just feel his chest rising and falling. And he was just this strong, Marley was such a special dog. What I tell people is that women wanted to be with him and men wanted to be like him. Like every dog
he's that dude guy.
Would look at him like, did you see that fool walk in here? And all the girl dogs were like, woo, tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah.
And he just had that.
Oh, I love Reddies. Yeah, wait, so man. Marley's a Rott?
He's a Rottweiler pit bull.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Rose. So I know they're playing.
Get him, Cool Rose. People give her people sell her short. She's 11 years old and she will wrestle with the best of them.
You're a beast. You're like a unicorn beast.
She is. She's get him.
So he's like, what is happening? Okay.
Skills.
So you were just saying, and I loved what you just said about like you could feel his breath and fur, and what would that do for you?
Well, what it did was help me realize what was real and what wasn't at the time. So I was freaking out.
Right.
And, my walls were closing in literally and figuratively. And what he helped me do was he was just transmitting strength into me to kind of like help me get through it, And, it wasn't just that. I mean, that was a couple day long. Cora Rose.
She's playing with him. I love it.
She commits.
He loves it.
Well, this little girl, man, she will commit little like doggy aside, like attempt to take her own life, jumping off and up everything. And people see her and their first response is, oh my God, she's missing her legs. The poor dog. Right. She can't do anything. And then you see her and she goes buck wild at all times. Like she jumps up and off and she's very reckless with her body. And considering how many injuries she's had, I'm pretty surprised.
What is she doing?
But yeah, there was a lot more in that experience that really changed the entire trajectory of my life. I had many, many, many rock bottoms, and I don't think I accepted any of them, and this one was for real because I was so desperately wanting to take my own life. Like I was so suicidal, and it wasn't just suicidal because I couldn't take it anymore. It was just suicide because I couldn't stand being awake. Just being awake was so difficult for me. I had so much self-loathing that had built up over so many years, and it was just all coming at me in a big snowball. And I didn't know how to accept it, and I didn't know how to. I certainly had no idea how to love myself through any of this. I was hating myself through every second of every day, as though that was going to help me improve or get better. And what I really needed was unconditional love. I needed somebody to tell me, you're okay. We've got you. We love you. We see you. And we recognize that you're still in there and that you might be struggling a lot, but that we love you, and there was a point where it was like 2 days. I don't remember exactly how many days it was that I kicked. But I was in bed, and when you're in liver failure, you take this stuff called annulose or lactulose, and it's to get the ammonia off your brain. And it makes you go to the bathroom constantly. It makes you poop. And it's really disgusting, and it's constant, and it's all day long. So I had gone, and what happened was I would go to the bathroom in bed, and because sometimes I couldn't get up, I didn't have my faculties. So I woke up at like 2 a.m, and I had gone to the bathroom in bed. And so I got up trying to clean myself off and trying to not wake up my dad to come help me because, and I went into the bathroom, and we have these big full length mirrors that are like the whole length of the bathroom. And, you know, it was real dark. We have these luminescent light bulbs. And I walked in there and I saw this view of myself, you know, like dirty and naked. And I looked so skinny and every part of my body was purple, like what in yellow. So my whole body was yellow, purple. I had this huge belly and all these varicose veins are streaming into my belly. And I look at my eye and my face is so gaunt. I had lost, you know, all my muscles had atrophied in the hospital and my face was really gaunt. I was almost 50 pounds lighter than I am now. And I walked into the bathroom and I caught my image and I just stared at myself and I just went, you know, like lost my breath. Like, oh my fucking God, look at you, man. Like, look at what you've done to yourself, you know? And I remember like getting really close to the mirror and trying to make out what I was looking at, you know? And I just started weeping, just like, oh my God, I cannot believe that it's come to this, you know? Like you have poo all over yourself and you don't know how to clean it off. And, you know, I haven't had a positive thought enter my head for many days at that point. I was just inundated with leave this world thoughts, you know, different ways to leave this world. That's all my brain would stay busy with, you know, and after all, like that was the only thing I could do to be of service to others was to try to figure out how to get me out of here. You know, like when you spend so much time being a nuisance and being a problem and being, you know, you end up looking for ways to remove yourself from the equation and save people close to you all of the pain of having to deal with you, you know?
So you thought taking yourself out of the equation was the best thing for...
Yeah. Plus, at the time, I really thought I was going to die. You know, I didn't think there was much hope. Just because I'd been admitted to the transplant program, I had less than 90 days to live. Like, that was one of the first things they said is your MELD score is...
What are you
know,
okay.
Well, you get a thing called a MELD score, model for end-stage liver disease. And based on that score, you're transplant eligible. It's kind of the gauge of your sickness. It takes into account your creatinine, which is your kidney function, your bilirubin, which is your liver function, and some other variables. And it spits out this number, and my number was 26. And I had a ridiculously high MELD score. So there was very, very little hope. And, you know, you just see how much pain and suffering is directly related to you that you're causing other people. You know, and, but I was having like you know, it was very cinematic almost because I was looking for a sign to make a decision, looking for some sort of a nudge in one direction or the other. And as I was looking into that mirror, I'm like, I got my nudge. I need to leave this world. Like I got it loud and fucking clear. I can't do this. I'm aware that I can't do this. I've tried. I'm so scared. I'm so terrible at living, you know, that the best thing very clearly the best thing I can do right now is leave this world, you know. And I looked down at the toilet, which is where I was headed. And all three of my dogs, Marley, Tug, and Buddy, were just sitting next to the toilet. And they were looking up at me while I was looking at myself, just like, that's our dad, you know, like that's our guy. And they looked at me with all of this, not just love, but adoration and that they needed me, and not just that they needed me like they were dependent, but that they loved me deeply, and that they saw that I was in there. They saw that I was still in there, and that I wasn't hopeless, and that maybe, you know, together we could love ourselves through this. And it happened, you know, it really did. In that moment, you know, I remember sitting down on the toilet there with Marley and just kind of putting my head on his shoulder and just thanking him so much for that, because it registered with me. And not a lot of things had registered with me. How many dozens of conversations I'd had, hundreds of conversations I'd had with people. It never registered. I could never be convinced to love myself, to like myself, much less love myself. And in that moment, you know, there was just so much love, so much appreciation. And all three of my dogs I'd rescued, you know, from the Mojave Animal Shelter and in Rosamond. And there was just this undeniable connection that I had to those three dogs. And at that moment, I went from being so convinced that I needed to leave this world to convinced to try, to like give it a shot. Like we're going to do this. We're going to at least we're going to fucking try, you know? And And I didn't go back to sleep that night. I just sat on the ground up against the bed and wrote in my journal. And I was convinced that I was going to die several days later and that someone would find my journal and they'd be like, Jesus Christ, this guy was a terrible speller and we could barely read his handwriting. You become so self-absorbed when you're struggling that you hate come up with any excuse not to like do something productive for yourself. It just gives you like an idea of the mindset, but and then we watched the sunrise and then from that day forward, every second of every day I put in towards trying to get better. Every second of every day. And at the time I couldn't walk. I could barely walk. That is to say, I could get like from here to the door, maybe a little bit further and then have to sit down. But the only thing that I can do to serve myself is to walk, is to try to get all this water weight off of me, and to try to get the ammonia off my brain. And so from that day forward, all I did was work with my dogs. We changed everything that I put in my body, my entire diet, everything that I consumed. And we started being of service to other alcoholics and to animals. And, it was all in rapid succession, like having that rock bottom moment in the mirror to being of service to, I started adding dogs to my pack. I started volunteering for another animal rescue, which I used to do before I got sick. And one dog became 2, became 3, became 5.
And you still had your 3?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then before you knew it, I was spending all of my time either at recovery meetings or at animal rescues. And I had to go to meetings because I was on what's called a liver card. Like a lot of people end up at meetings on a court card. And I was on a liver transplant card. So I needed to prove I was going to a meeting every day in order to be transplant eligible. And we'd have to fax that to Cedars, to let them know that I was being diligent with my time.
Wow.
And then, again, long story short, I was going to Cedars every week for checkups and then every 2 weeks. And after about 3 months, the team said, like, we don't know what you're doing, but like, whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it. We've never seen a turnaround like this, please keep. And then, by the time I got 6 months of sobriety, which I had my big transplant review, they said, look, you're doing phenomenally well. Your numbers have like radically improved. We are not actively going to be searching for transplant options for you. If you keep up this trajectory, you're not going to need one.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so now fast forward 16 years and
holy shit.
I'm still a comprehensive transplant patient. I still go in every 6 months for, CTs and liver MRIs and all kinds of different stuff. But I have my same liver. I'm healthy.
That's
and my cirrhosis.
Insane story.
Yeah. Yeah. And my cirrhosis has regressed from end stage cirrhosis of the liver to what's called stage 3 fibrosis. So I have liver disease, but I'm not dying. And my liver continues to improve. My kidneys continue to improve.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So Marley, so you have an animal foundation rescue called Marley's Mutts. So you're going to your meetings, you're walking the dogs, you're working with the dogs, and when you say working with the dogs, like these are rescues that have been in stressful, high stress situations, like whatever, just like
all of the dogs in our region come from Bakersfield City Animal Care Center, the city shelter, or Kern County Animal Services, the county shelter.
So you'd walk with them and hang with them and love on them. And was this to get them adopted, or was these were your dogs?
Yeah. So what I did was I started volunteering for Canine Canyon Ranch and the Humane Society of Tehachapi. And I started creating posters for them. So I would bring dogs into my home and I would do structured walks. So we would walk in the mountains, no leash. So I'd get them to learn how to follow. And my pack was so good about staying with me. And then we would do these ludicrous wanted posters. So I would do these hilarious, so every poster was like the dog was in prison for disorderly conduct, like streaking or flashing or drunk in public or peeing in public or fighting and whatever.
Wait. Okay, go on.
And then we'd make up these ludicrous stories to go along with like who they were gang affiliated with or whatever. And then, and if there were 2 of them, we'd connect their stories and like, make it some. And then we put these posters all over town. This is before Facebook, right? So there was no social media.
Sure. Yeah.
So
I know those days.
Animal rescue is about marketing. It is about being a used dog salesman. You can't just, that is 95% of animal rescue is learning how to market these dogs, giving them obviously the structure that they need to get the skills they need to get adopted and stay adopted. But more than anything, it's about resonating. It's about making a connection between the reader or the viewer and that dog. And because they can't see him in person. So you got to try to make them connect. And so I would put them up all over town. And as I'm putting up all these posters, I'm the yellow sick guy with the black pit bull that everyone sees. And so I became the sick pit bull guy putting up all these posters, and people would always read my post. I mean, at every store in town, I put them up everywhere. And so I got to know everybody in town, and they would know my story and they would get to know who I was. And then about 6 months into that, the veterinary hospital was like, why don't you just do this on your own? And we'll give you a couple kennels so you can take in our strays. We'll help you financially that way with some of your infrastructure, Oh my God. And that's how it took. I didn't even come up with the name Marley's Mutts. It was one of the staff members at the hospital, because all the rescues at that time were breed specific. Doberman,
really?
German Shepherd, all the ones in our area were breed specific. And so we wanted a rescue for the Mutts, we all had Mutts.
Yeah.
And so Marley was my pack general. So Marley's Mutts.
I love this.
And then by the time I still didn't really believe in myself in that capacity. I didn't think I was going to be an animal rescue. I didn't know you could do that, right? All the people that did it in our community were 70-year-old women.
Yeah.
So I didn't see the connection. Everybody in the genre was female. So I didn't have really the confidence to do so. And then I kind of did some investigating and how difficult could this be? And I said, fuck it, let's do it. We're gonna.
So Zach, I ask everybody if they're comfortable, if they will do their dog voice. You can do both. Beta and Cora, if they're different voices, but if they're the same voice, give it to us. Yeah,
so it pretty much goes, who's my big baby girl? Who's my big baby girl? Who's my big beautiful baby girl? And then varieties of that. And then same thing with her. What I always get in with her is I always try to let her know how hardcore she is compared to all the rest of the golden retrievers. So our talk goes something like, hey, don't you let anyone out there tell you have white dog privilege, because you come from the streets of Beirut and you have been through a lot, and I recognize you and I see you and I love you. Let's go get them. Because we're spending most of our time in prison. So if she's coming in, she's with me every week in there.
Yeah.
So I got to make sure she can roll in there with her shoulders back and her chin up.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm like, you remind them, you let them know where you come from.
Yeah, girl.
From the street, son.
Yeah, from the street, son. I love it so much. Yeah. Okay, great.
And I mean, you remember the huge explosion in Beirut that ripped through the entire port? It's the biggest non-nuclear explosion.
It was insanity.
Yeah, yeah. She was there for that. We were there right before and right after. Went down to the port and saw all the devastation, and it was wild.
That was bonkers when that. I remember it.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. On film.
The other question I always ask, which you don't have to answer at this moment because you can think about it because it throws people off, and I'm starting to. I should give questions before, is if they had occupations in the world, what were their occupations?
Oh, what did I do prior to animal rescue?
No. If they had occupations.
If the dogs had occupations.
But also, yes, I would like to hear what you did before.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so you can think about it because
Cora Rose would work for the circus, clearly. Cora Rose would work in the circus.
Yes, she would.
Yeah, come see the incredible two-legged, pink-eared wonder dog. Because she's kind of part like magical dragon, part big bird, part poodle.
Cora,
part street thug, to be honest. I mean, she was feral when we got her. She was like
unreal,
not really comfortable with petting and all kinds of stuff.
When you met Cora, what was happening with the front legs? Were they already amputated, or were they?
No,
she just didn't have them.
No, so Cora. There's a story to this. Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
All right,
I need these two stories, and then I need the Pawsitive Change story.
So Cora Rose had a predecessor. Her name was Noelle. Noelle came to us with bilateral fractures of her front legs, broken front legs. We tried to fix one, didn't work, had to amputate. Tried to fix the other, didn't work, had to amputate. Bones are too far gone. They're too small. So this dog, who's a little bit smaller than Cora, became our first double leg amputee. This was very controversial. The hospital didn't want to do this surgery. It was very challenging to get them to even proceed, and to have staff that were willing to sit in the surgery, believe it or not.
Wow.
So
really?
Yeah. And then when you see a dog who's just had both of its front legs amputated and it's sitting there in a crate, your first thought is, holy shit. Like, did we make the right decision? Did we do the right thing? Is this dog just going to be like not able to do anything? Like but we believed in her and we trusted that she would be able to figure it out. And she did. And it was miraculous and it was magical. And I took that dog everywhere with me, and she was part of our jockey campaign, the national clothing campaign. So the first pit bull and first, biped dog to be in a national campaign.
What is the jockey campaign?
It's called Show 'em. It was with Jockey in 2000.
Like jockey underwear?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That was me in my drawers with.
Oh my God.
With Oliver, Kira, who was a pitty that I was fostering, and Noelle, who I was fostering.
Amazing.
Yeah, if you Google Zach, Show 'em, jockey.
And I'm going to.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so what happened was she was the love of my life, this dog, Noelle. I absolutely loved her. We had been through so much. She had shown that two-legged dogs were viable, that you could go through this procedure and they would still thrive. Mm-hmm. So as soon as she got adopted, Modesto Animal Shelter reached out. They said, yo, we saw Noelle on your page. We have another dog with bilateral fractures. Her biggest injury, though, was she had a shattered pelvis, like in 9 places. She had broken teeth. She had broken front legs, and it was the same experience. So the leg came off immediately because it had a bone infection and could have killed her. And then we tried to get an assessment on the second leg, couldn't save it, so we had to amputate.
Oh my God.
And it was very traumatic, and she took a long time to get up to speed. She had to kind of create flexibility in her lower back and her hips. That was the biggest conundrum, was allowing her hips to heal. And so we put a t-shirt on her. We put all these little things on her so we could kind of help her practice walking. Mm. And every month she would make a milestone. Every month she would start to walk. She'd start to go upstairs. She'd start to go downstairs. She can run up a flight of stairs faster than you can run. Like, she's remarkable. So that's kind of her story. And I really just, like, my daughter came home the same month as her, and she grew up with my daughter. And
oh my God.
So my first daughter. And so, we just decided to keep her. And which is very strange because I had only reactive pit bulls, canes for a decade plus prior to that. All I had was all the bad kids of our rescue that couldn't
get adopted,
be in foster homes because they were reactive. So I had 7 kennels at my house with a bunch of big, bad, gnarly dogs. And then after my kids came along and those dogs got adopted, we kind of shifted to this little girl. And of course we had other big dogs, and I had another pit bull at the time named Avery. But yeah, so she's been with me ever since. She is a double amputee. Her hips have healed really well. She's like, she's a certified therapy dog. I bring her everywhere with me. I bring her to prison with me all the time. She comes in. She's a huge hit wherever we've been, all over the California state penal system. She's a really big hit.
What an incredible story.
Yeah, so that's her little story. And now like even the staff members at that hospital that wouldn't sit for the surgery, namely their lead veterinary technician, we've now had like 8 or 9 dogs like this within our rescue whom we've had to bilaterally amputate. And she pulled me aside after the last dog, and she said, hey, can I help you walk him to the car? I said, yeah, sure. And she said, hey, I just wanted you to know I was the gal that didn't want to sit for the surgery, because I just didn't know. And I just wanted to apologize and say like, thank you for doing everything, because we had so many injured dogs going into VCA, and I would bring in her with me on the backpack because she's their foster sister. And they would see her over and over again. They go, oh my God, that was the dog who we almost didn't allow the surgery to happen.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So she's kind of, she's like the Rosa Parks of bipeds.
Yeah.
Of double amputee dogs.
She's led the charge.
And now they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Now there's whole Facebook pages dedicated to bilateral amputees. It's a whole deal.
Look at her. Look at her hair. Look at her butt. And okay. Yeah. So Pawsitive Change. Mm-hmm. So go back there. So obviously you have a ton of experience with like dogs that are difficult. I'll just say like deemed, not adoptable or whatever.
Yeah.
And so how did you make the connection to people, to men specifically, I think, in prison and dogs that are on death row, and and how did you connect how they could heal each other?
Well, really it was so how should I put this? The development, all right, let me back up. So I created Marley. When I created Marley's Mutts, I didn't just want to have it be like another rescue where we're trying to rescue one dog out at a time, just a drop in the bucket, not really making any sort of an impact, just kind of treading water in the rescue space. That's the last thing I wanted to do. So if I was going to do this, I wanted to have a training component, an education and therapy component. I wanted to have a transport component, spay and neuter component. I wanted to address all of the variables that cause the issues we have within animal sheltering and rescue. So that's what we did. So the first initiative we created was our spay and neuter program, then Miracle Mutts in 2012. So we have 30 dog teams that are going to various institutions, hospitals, more than 100 different nonprofits, just focusing on the human animal bond. So Miracle Mutts is schools, is adult daycares, is children's daycares, is achievement centers for autistic youth. It's all of these things. Mutt Movers is our rescue by relocation. So we have a bus and a van. We also work with various aviation related rescues to get dogs to areas of low concentration euthanasia. So Pacific Northwest, Middle West, Upper Middle West, Canada.
I think I'm talking to, do you know Wings of Rescue or do you know? Yeah.
Wings of Rescue has kind of been around forever. They're they are a great organization. Yeah. We've worked with them a bunch of times in the past. And so, part of that progression was wanting to do more, save more, help more. And we only had foster homes. We were only as successful or as large as we could put dogs into foster homes. Because again, we didn't have the rescue ranch at the time. So all I'm thinking is, how can I get more fosters? How can I get more fosters who can maintain a structure and can try to help make this work? So I approached the jail system at first, not knowing, I had an in at the sheriff's department, and then we started to try to do prisons, and we got brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. Nobody wanted to have us.
Why? Why is that?
Because, I think that operating in a prison is very rigid and is very fear-based. It really is. It's a very difficult environment to work in. What those correctional officers go through is it's a very tense, very rigid environment. So adding something new to that they have to adjust to, that could be threatening. They just weren't sure. Yeah. And it was very much an us versus them mentality back then. Very much so.
Yeah.
So we finally got Warden David Long to take a chance on us. He's an incredible warden at California City Correctional Facility. He's now with CDCR at probation and parole. And he said, you know what, let's give this a shot. Let's believe in you guys. Let's make this happen. So Leah Marquez and Lisa Porter and myself, put together the program, and we launched January of 2016. Samantha Johnson, Kim Erickson, some of the best dog trainers on the face of the planet. Those 4 women in particular, I've learned more from than almost anybody else that I've come across in my entire career in animal welfare, because of not only how they are naturally intuitive, smart trainers, but how they carry themselves, how they manage their energy, the energy they're projecting, and also how they operate inside of a prison. So that was our first prison, California City. We were there until it closed last year. We then quickly opened at North Kern State Prison, Wasco State Prison, and then the granddaddy, which was Corcoran State Prison, level 4, right next to where Charlie Manson was. And so this is a level 4, 180, this most secure prison that we have in California. Very, very violent place. Probably the most violent, if not one of the most violent yards in California. And that was really special because not only is it special because several of those students are out and very close to them. Shout out to Dante Farmer and Brian James. But it let us know what we were capable of, that we could go into these very difficult environments where gangs controlled every housing unit and pod, and we could sit with the leaders of those, every different faction, and that we could get guys to work outside of their race, even in the most volatile, kind of hostile environments, because the prison system is very, very segregated, whites, blacks, northerners, southerners, others. And so you're in one of those 5 categories, and y'all don't mingle, you don't eat together, play together, so to come into a setting like that where you can encourage groups to get along with each other and to team up, and there's 3 students per dog and they're all paired outside of their race. So you got a white guy, a Hispanic guy, and a black guy, all on the same team, rival gang members, working with each other to rehabilitate these dogs was very, very special. And several of those dogs got adopted to their families. Several of our guys who were juvenile lifers at the time, so in other words, sent to prison for life as juveniles, got out of prison. Brian James served 29 years. He's one of my closest friends. I love that guy to death. And he's out here working in for Paws for Life. He worked for a bunch of different dog places. He now works for a recovery facility as their house manager.
That is so incredible to me, just like what you're talking about and all the different, I say, when we talk about this bond, it is the great unifier, in a lot of, so you're talking about all these different people. What do you think it is specifically about the relationship and what happens between that person who's been through that life, this dog who's been through this life, coming together in this moment to teach, heal, learn? What is that bond? What is it? I mean, I know what it is. I know what it feels like for someone like me, but for these guys and for these animals,
I know, I've interviewed a bunch of my guys when we're there. We teach every week. And so I'm in prison 3 days a week. And what I've seen for those guys is that prison is a very violent, very dark, it is an incubator of violence and negativity. It is difficult for positivity to thrive in there, and for you to even put your mind into to allow itself to focus on positivity. It was almost thoroughly and completely negative. There is no love. There is no emotional. You can't express emotions because emotions are considered weakness. So the first thing a dog does in there is it allows you to express your emotions. It allows you to feel loved and to express love. So you're allowed to talk like a baby. You're allowed to be vulnerable. You're allowed to show this completely different version of yourself, sans the hardcore visage that you're used to projecting. The other thing that dogs do is that we can lose sight of home in prison. You are essentially in a torture chamber for decades. Many of our guys are never getting out of prison. We have death row students. We have very long-term incarcerated, et cetera. So the idea of home is fickle, if not invisible. It just doesn't exist. And if you don't have an idea that you're coming home or that home awaits you, you disappear into the abyss of prison, and you can fall victim to the darkness and the negativity. It can envelop you, and it can just take a hold of you. But what the dogs, really do is represent home. They represent home, coming home, safety of emotions. And just to be able to bring something like this into a prison pod that kind of is a metaphor for home, it changes the entire mindset. So they start focusing on home. They start focusing on programming. One of the greatest things Pawsitive Change does is that almost every prison is trying to get you to politic. It's trying to pull you into the abyss of prison politics, violence, gangs, drugs, etc. And you will not be successful, and you will not get out of prison, and you will continue to reoffend, and all these bad things will happen if you stay in that rut. But Pawsitive Change provides a groove. You can get out of that rut and you can get into a groove, and within that groove is programming and so we see guys who will be in Pawsitive Change it's the first program they've ever done in prison. After Pawsitive Change, or while they're doing Pawsitive Change, you see them enroll in alternatives to violence and OMCP and recovery programs and Defy Ventures and Compassion Prison Projects. So you see them switch gears. That's how they get out of that politicking rut and into a self-improvement groove. And so many of our guys, they just utterly change their trajectory when they get into Pawsitive Change, because their time is just totally different.
I'm sure.
And just like I explained with my experience early on, there is when you juxtapose a dog from your consciousness, and this, especially when you're not used to receiving love or affirmation or just eyes staring back at you that love you, it forces this shift in your consciousness because otherwise you're telling the dog, I don't believe you. But if you have even just a smidgen of your heart and your mind open to what this dog's trying to communicate to you, then you'll get better, and you'll start to get some self-esteem. You'll start to build. You have to be receptive to what your dogs are trying to tell you, and if you do that, it can really change your life. And then you add on top of it the structure that, a lot of our guys are parents. They don't get to see or touch or feel their kids. And so they get to be parents to these dogs.
Yeah.
They also get to have their families see them on our social media in prison being of service. Wow. Most of these guys haven't been of service to anything other than themselves in their entire life. And they'll be the first people to tell you that. God. So to give people an opportunity to serve, service over self is the only way to salvation, period. In my opinion, the only way we can truly holistically improve as human beings and try to alter our consciousness is through service, is to truly helping something other than yourself and giving it your all. And to watch people build their identity in service as a representative of positive change, as opposed to a representative of their gang, is really special. It's a really, really, because you see their self-esteem just start to take over. They get so much more self-esteem by being active in our program as opposed to an active
and
gang member.
Self-love and to feel love for anything, I would imagine too. Yeah. That's like, I say they open our hearts in a way that only, as you just said, that kind of eye staring back at you. They make it very difficult for you to not feel. You can look at another human and not get that.
Yeah. Or wonder if they have ulterior motives or
1,000%. Yeah. But when you look at their eyes, they're clear and they're pure and it's something else happens. I want 4 more hours.
How much?
So this is just part 1.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, this is part 1.
I mean, let's look right into that camera and tell me this face doesn't deserve a part.
Thank you all so much for listening to this very special episode of Unconditional. There will be a part 2 with Zach. Want to talk to some of the students that he works with, and also just to hear more about his program and his story. But thank you, Zach, and thank you all so much for listening.